Cracking down on multinational corporations and a shake-up of royalty schemes would deliver hundreds of billions to our national income, according to a new report. Published by Climate Energy Finance, a think tank, the study argues for a suite of changes to the tax system, which it claims are not delivering the budget as much revenue as they should. Let's go live to Tim Buckley. He's Director of Climate Energy Finance. Tim, thanks for your time. We're not talking about small change here, are we? Across a decade, some of the changes you're suggesting will generate upwards of $300 billion.
Correct, and so therefore it is critically important. It's in the national interest. The ALP government has inherited a $1 trillion deficit, an $80 billion annual deficit, and it's going to be on Jim Chalmers to come up with significant new revenue opportunities, but within the constraint of the Albanese government's pledge of no new major taxes. So what we're proposing is reform of existing taxes to actually make sure Australia gets some reasonable fair share of the taxes and royalties that the fossil fuel industry is getting at the moment, and they're making huge windfall gains. And so now is the best time to actually make sure that Australians share some of that windfall profit.
So you're looking to amend existing taxes, from what I can read in the report as well, also suggesting that some of the handouts should cease or at least be capped.
Correct. I mean, Jim Chalmers has made it very clear, as has Anthony Albanese, that they will not extend the 6-month fuel excise reduction for 25 million Australians. But I'm pointing out that for the last 60 years, the fossil fuel industry, the mining industry, has had a diesel fuel rebate. That rebate costs Australia's government $7 to $9 billion a year. It grows significantly every year, and there are probably only 10 companies that get $4 to $5 billion of that. So I'm proposing capping the diesel fuel rebate at $50 million per firm per year, and therefore thereafter allowing that, or requiring those mining firms to pay the same tax that every other Australian pays, particularly at a time when we've just seen BHP report absolute record high profits, Santos record high profits, Glencore record high profits, and yet everyone in Australia is suffering an energy crisis, and the federal government has a fiscal crisis to boot.
Yeah, it does seem a bit perverse when these record profits are happening and yet our energy shortages have been so evident over recent months. What are you saying in relation to the gas exports, which have been really front and centre in that energy debate? What should happen there in terms of the windfall profits that have been enjoyed?
Yeah, great question. I mean, at the end of the day, we have a state-based system for onshore developments for royalties, and federal covers the offshore oil and gas industry. Now, what is very, very clear that in Western Australia, there is a gas reservation. There has been now for a couple of decades, and that is insulating Western Australians from the rampant global hyperinflation in oil, gas and coal prices. East Coast, 22 million Australians are wearing the impact of the East Coast government, state governments and the federal government doing nothing to protect us when they approved 6 concurrent LNG trains to be built at Gladstone. So I'm proposing, we have a gas cartel, according to the report from the ACCC, only 2 weeks ago, highlighting 90% of the gas reserves in Eastern Australia are controlled by 3 consortia. Those consortia have ramped the price up for gas on the East Coast tenfold, 1,000% in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and we are now paying above export price parity. So when you have a clear oligopoly extracting monopoly rents and it's a cartel-like operation, I think you need drastic response. So we're actually recommending a export-only levy on East Coast gas for the objective of reducing immediately the price that domestic users of gas would pay. So you put the the levy only on exports, you put it on with immediate effect, and the domestic East Coast gas price would drop immediately to the extent of the levy, because the cartel would actually therefore have a financial incentive to service domestic users first and export the surplus. Now, that is obviously a new tax. I'm calling it a levy to get around the wording, but at the end of the day, drastic measures are called for. You've got regulatory failure, you've got regulatory capture, and you have 22 million Australians paying through the nose for gas. And also, we've had a trebling of the electricity price on the east coast of Australia this year, because gas is the marginal pricer of electricity on the east coast. So at the end of the day, an export-only levy on east coast gas production would immediately solve a huge part of the energy crisis smashing 22 million Australians right now.
And just finally, with from the political view, I know I'm not expecting you to talk on the politics of it, but if you can just look at the comparison, say, with that mining tax that Labor introduced many years ago, which makes me think they're reticent about it again this time. How is what you're suggesting, how does it differ from that if you're seeking to convince Labor of the merits of it?
Yeah, there's a huge difference at a time when we just saw BHP yesterday report that their Queensland coal industry operations delivered a 73% return on investment, 73% return in just 1 year because of the record high coal prices. So this would only impact exports. It would only impact, I'm proposing that New South Wales replicate what Queensland's already done in terms of implementing a progressive royalty system for New South Wales coal exports. The opportunity cost of us not doing that in New South Wales is upwards of $20 billion this year if prices stay where they are at the moment, which is 5 to 10 times higher. But the key point to your question, I'd only propose a progressive royalty. If prices go back to the long-term average, then a progressive royalty that kicks in above $300 a tonne, like Cameron Dick's done in Queensland, would have absolutely no impact on the industry. So 1 year in 10, they would pay a progressive royalty. 9 out of 10 years, they'd go back to earning their normal profits. But in a year when they're making 70% returns on investment, I think that's a time when we are all paying record high energy prices. We're all seeing our mortgages going through the roof because of inflation, going through the roof because of energy prices. At the end of the day, we all wear the pain. We ultimately also wear the climate costs of this. So I think it's absolutely appropriate that we focus on sharing some of those windfall war profits with Australia.
Yeah. Tim Buckley, Director of Climate Energy Finance, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Kieran.